But just to say, I'm Charlotte. Hi, I'm one of the area managers at Culture Bridge North East. And you probably know a little bit about us, but we are Art Council England's bridge organisation for the North East, and we connect the education sector with the cultural sector, so kids have the best opportunities for a great cultural education. And Jeanne's going to go through some housekeeping in terms of what we're doing today, so I won't go into that. It's just to say we are recording the session so that we can put it online and everybody else can enjoy it and learn from it as well. And that'll be available soon on our website, along with the last 2 dance sessions from CreatED. And we've got music ones on there, and our next series is going to be art and design, so it's all going to kind of build upon that website, and you can have a look at those. So some of you have met Jeanne before, but Jeanne is our creative classroom producer, and she's an independent consultant working within schools. Jeanne was a head teacher, and she's always really valued and championed the arts. So she's here today as our facilitator. So I'll hand over now to Jeanne.
Great. Thank you very much. Well, morning, everybody. Sorry for the delay, but we'll kind of crack on and get through it. I'm going to screen share. Okay, so can everybody see that? Brilliant. So this is the third of 3 sessions. I know some of you attended the first 2. We've had to flip it and do it in reverse order. Normally this session would be an introduction to the series, with the second 2 sessions with the kind of industry specialist, but we had to flip it because of Rob's own commitments. So the 2 sessions that Rob did were really about himself as a dancer and how he works with schools. And this is really what we've called a knowledge exchange, but it's actually just to come back to where you all are in schools and actually look at where dance is, how dance has developed, and what your kind of current kind of issues and needs are. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to have a think about where things are at the moment and how things are feeling. We're going to look at current provision. What does dance look like in schools, and what has been the impact of COVID, because the chances are we're going to be living with this for quite some time. I'd like to talk a little bit and share with you and get you to think a little bit more about why dance is important as part of the curriculum. I think sometimes within the PE curriculum it can get a little sidelined, so I'd really like to kind of have a look at why we think it's important. I'd like to explore with you kind of models and approaches that you use currently in your school for delivery, and also perhaps for you to kind of think about what other options there are. And then finally, we'll look at what's working well, where your key challenges are, and we're interested in where you might have any needs moving forwards. Okay, so I'm going to start with a quote from Darren Henley, who's Chief Executive of the Arts Council. Darren is a huge advocate of the arts for children and young people, and actually has been quite instrumental in moving the children and young people's agenda within the Arts Council. Just let you kind of read that yourself. But I think, you know, for those of us who feel that the arts are a really, really important strand as part of the curriculum, this is a really good quote to use. Hopefully, some of what I've put in the PowerPoint you'll find useful if you're a PE leader or you're kind of leading a creative aspect of the curriculum, and you'll be able to use some of this perhaps with your own staff. A high quality cultural education in every school should be a right and not a privilege. And I think that's something that really has resonated with me through all of my career, and I still hold true to that. So just a little bit of kind of light-hearted stuff to start with. How are you feeling about how dance is being delivered in your school? Where do you feel it sits? What priority does it have? How do you feel about the role you play within all of that? And just have a look at some of these images. If you can, perhaps pick 1 or 2, and in the chat facility, if you just write the number and then a little comment beside it, and then we'll share that. A few minutes to have a look, a few minutes to have a think, and then stick something in chat for us to share. So, you know, I'm just thinking it might be that I'm looking at 21. If I was to write about 21, it might be that the way I'm feeling at the moment is that we do quite a lot of things, but they don't really have any kind of permanence. That, you know, in the way that you blow a dandelion and it all disappears. That's maybe how I feel about dance in my school. Or is it 24? It's kind of, there's a direction of travel, but quite a lot of people go the opposite direction. Just a bit of fun, really.
Got some coming through now. So
Okay.
Nicola says it's number 21 for her, starting out on the journey, hoping it will grow into something more than a dandelion.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And that's really interesting, because that's a different interpretation of the dandelion than the one I had, which was it just disperses and then there's nothing left. So good thinking.
Excellent. Alison is 19. We all do our little bit and it slots together and builds a bigger picture.
Brilliant. And that's good if you feel that actually that's what you've got working in your school, that everything does slot into the big picture. That's a really positive thing.
Amy's number 4. I think that's a dinosaur, isn't it? Potentially teachers feel nervous to deliver dance and therefore may attempt to avoid it.
Okay, and that's not uncommon, is it? I think that is something that I find a lot in schools, that there is potentially a confidence issue, and the easiest way is to avoid it if you can. So just a simple sharing thing. And again, if you're looking at this with your staff, it's a light-hearted way of kind of trying to gauge where people are at, and it's kind of in a non-threatening way, really, because you're kind of interpreting an image rather than kind of talking about yourself as such. Okay.
So there's a couple more. I don't know if you want me to read them.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so we've got number 15 from Claire. I work across many schools, delivering support, so a sense of endlessly moving forward. Walk.
Right. Is that endlessly in a positive sense or in a, wow, this is really great? Oh, that's great. Good. Well done, Claire.
And Amy's put 22, dance should be celebrated and should be bright and creative across the curriculum. And 23, we're getting the Arts Award, and therefore we are currently moulding and adapting our curriculum.
Oh, fantastic. Congratulations. Got it or working towards it?
We're currently working towards it. We've got Dance City in at the moment, and the children are learning like a performance to perform, and that's the Arts Awards kind of incorporated within that as well.
Excellent. That's really good. Brilliant. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing and contributing. So next section really is to look at what dance provision looks like at the moment in schools and what has been the impact of COVID-19. So I thought we would just do a little review of national curriculum requirements, and it surprises me how little information there is in the national curriculum about what dance should be. And because we're looking at primaries, I've picked Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. Minimal descriptors and lots of similarity between Key Stage 1 and 2, a sense that there should be some development of some sort. So fundamental movement skills in Key Stage 1, a broader range of skills in Key Stage 2. It's not particularly helpful for teachers if you're not a dance specialist. What does that mean? And how do teachers interpret that? And I think this is, again, a bit of a fundamental issue, that there isn't the right kind of guidance, in a sense, for teachers who have no dance experience to teach it. And I also think it suffers a little bit because it sits in the PE curriculum, and it's interpreted as a kind of physical activity. There's a lot more to dance, and we're going to explore that a little bit further as well. So if we take this one step further, minimal guidance, but we all know what effective teaching and learning should look like. So we would expect to see a balance of activities, so that some skills building, obviously, learning movements, refining movements, and some element of performance in being able to present to an audience. There's a huge amount that can be done through dance in terms of choreography, in terms of creating movement, for young children to actively be creating different movements, or starting with one movement and taking that to a different level. And then some element of review. I think it's important that as part of that process, skills building, creating, performing, that there is some sense of feedback and some analysis, some review of what they've been doing. So to be able to share, to be able to comment on other people's performances as well. So a balance of all of those things. So if you think about that as effective teaching and learning in dance, and you compare it to the minimal guidance that teachers are given, is there any reason why, is there any question why we sometimes struggle with it in the curriculum? I wanted to touch on PE and sports premium funding, because I think this is a significant resource in schools that can be used to support the delivery of dance, but sometimes dance doesn't factor into this, that actually PE and sports premium funding is often used for other PE activities rather than dance. But actually, you can use PE and sports funding. And these are the areas that you can justify expenditure under. So you can train and upskill teachers to feel more confident about delivering dance. You can use PE and sports funding to buy specialist expertise. So a justifiable reason of using your funding could be to bring in a dance specialist to work alongside teachers, or bring a dance specialist in to work alongside a teacher with children. So you are upskilling teachers as part of that process of giving children an enriched experience because you've got a specialist coming in to work with you. Looking at that out of after school, out of hours provision, again, is a justifiable expenditure for PE and sports premium. And again, is it often funding dance activity? The majority of the time, I would say not, but it is a justifiable expense. And I think this is another interesting one, the final bullet point, this notion of developing dance performance platforms with local schools. So actually, you could use your funding to create within a group of schools a network of activity that could be shared. You might choose to pool some funding and buy in a dance specialist who might work across a group of schools, and then you've got a performance platform where you can share activity. So there's lots of options, but please consider using your PE and sports premium funding to enhance dance provision in school, because it's entirely justified. Touching on again where we're at, it's kind of, what is the current state of play? Current COVID guidelines have obviously impacted on a lot of activity, social distancing, bubbles, all of that impacts on how effectively we can work. Limited group numbers, and actually this whole notion of kind of avoiding physical contact during dance and drama are all in the COVID guidelines for schools. So there are limitations there at the moment within which we understand that we have to work or work around some of these barriers. I've highlighted this because I think this is quite an interesting document if you are leading PE in your school. It's a useful document to know about. It's One Dance UK, and I'll come back to One Dance UK later in the session. They did a survey of the state of dance in schools, in and beyond schools, during COVID-19, and this is last August. And actually what they've produced is quite a candid report about the situation currently, and the notion that dance already has a precarious position in the curriculum, and that actually COVID-19 hasn't helped that. So I'm just flagging that up as a useful document for you to think about. And I've picked out some of the key themes from it. So one of the things that has happened is that there has been an explosion of online provision, and some of it of varied quality. So again, perhaps a role somebody needs to have in school is that of quality assurance. If there's a wealth of stuff out there, how do we know how good it is? I think the other thing that comes out of this report is that teachers consider that it's more difficult to do things that are online Now, I would question that now, because I think almost a year further on, I think teachers are much more used to working with online content. The inequality of facility space and equipment that children and young people have is a limiting factor for anything online. But a lot of young people dance in their bedrooms, don't they? And they don't need a lot of room to do that. So again, an interesting kind of factor. This is a key one for me, the next one, and that is the whole thing around digital poverty. I think we've come a long way to address IT access for remote learning for pupils, but digital poverty is still a barrier to any online learning. The catch-up and associated funding that's now available to schools might just be focused on core subjects, which again means dance becomes marginalised. But actually, if you're talking about pupils' well-being and physical well-being, maybe some catch-up could be on physical activity, and maybe some catch-up could be around dance activity, which gives children a creative outlet as well. This is an interesting one as well, that actually there's a lot of concern about dance in the curriculum. Perhaps particularly in secondary schools, we're seeing a big drop-off in terms of dance teaching, and it has a precarious place in the curriculum, perhaps less so in a primary school. But all of what's happening with COVID is not helping that situation, because I think people feel that they're operating within limitations. Externally, and Claire, you're someone who works across a lot of schools, aren't you? That actually the impact of the infrastructure for dance externally is very much at risk of being fragmented. That actually the impact of COVID on professional dancers and their access to work and their ability to work has been severely restricted because of COVID, and recovery from that is going to take time. And aligning with that the concern that longer term there might be a loss of significant expertise from the profession, because people have to make a living. If you can't make a living through dance, which is your profession, you're going to have to find a way of making a living somewhere else. So I just think there's some really interesting kind of red flags in this document. I'm not saying that all will come to fruition, but I think they're red flags that perhaps we all need to be conscious of, and the school sector need to be conscious of as well. Okay, so we were going to go into our first breakout room, which was just to reflect on some of the things that I've talked about and share some thoughts with each other about some of the challenges that you face around delivery during the current time, and any strategies that you've used to overcome them. So I'm going to stop screen sharing so that I can see everybody for this next section. And rather than going to breakout rooms as we planned, because we are quite a small group, I'm happy just to have a kind of facilitated conversation with you all, if you're happy with that. If you prefer to go into breakout rooms, just put a thumbs up and Charlotte can organise it. Any thoughts, anybody? I think you can all unmute now, if we're going to share some thoughts. Anybody got any thoughts on some of the challenges?
I know I'm sure it'll be the same across all schools, but obviously with COVID and kind of the restriction of movement, we are very much like, so for example in the classroom we're setting our table groups. When we're in the hall, we've got to kind of stay within our kind of bubble, because it's due to like the close contact now, so the children have kind of got to stay with the same children. Being able to kind of mix with other groups of children in regards to like other year groups. I know, for example, in Dance City, the project that I'm doing with Dance City, we've got year 3 and 4, but they're very much separate, and it's very much kind of very rigid and kind of chunked up, so it hasn't got that kind of flow, and it does kind of take away that kind of enthusiasm and fun factor, because the children kind of got to stick to their spots, to their places. It's a lot more kind of rigid and fragmented. So I think that's been a real challenge that we've found difficult, and I think the children have found really difficult as well.
Yeah. Have any of you, just in terms of does what Amy has said kind of resonate with those of you in schools, that kind of lack of free flow to things that you do now?
Yeah. Sorry, I can definitely resonate. I'm in early years, so when we are a bubble within ourselves and don't have to sort of maintain the strict distancing, but I do know that even just the access to the hall, if another group's been in, then we wouldn't follow them in and things like that. One of our kind of sticking points has been the chance to perform, having the audience. It's either been the other classes have come to see, or the parents have come in to watch something, and it's just the work that we're doing in our own little bubbles we don't get to share. And I think that's been one of the effects of the COVID for us.
Yeah, so Nicola's just put in chat, we've used the opportunity to explore different options, including whole school projects completed in bubbles but shared by making combined videos. So that's one way of kind of overcoming that kind of sharing option, isn't it? Carly, were you about to say something?
I was just going to say exactly the same. I think in terms of our hall at school is quite small, so we try and do all of our PE lessons and those kind of lessons outdoors as much as possible. But obviously with dance, the use of music, the use of kind of a background or a stimulus, it's easier to do it indoors. So I think that's it. But in some respects, if it has been bad weather, because dance doesn't really require any equipment, really, it's something that can be done, and then you're not worrying about, has somebody else touched this or nobody. So in terms of resources, because we don't have a huge amount of resources, so I find that dance is probably, or if you've got the windows and you've got the space and it's and you're socially distanced, because of the lack of resources, it would have been a great opportunity if the teachers felt more confident. And I suppose I've previously been, I was a long-term supplier at school, and they had a dancer specialist coming into school to lead PE lessons. It's really good. So it's something that I think would be great, but I suppose it's something that we probably couldn't afford across the whole school. So just, does anyone have any advice on actually where they would, because our year 3 supports, they have swimming, access pushing, they have things. So would you say Key Stage 1 would be an appropriate age for that kind of thing? And it would be like, because that to me, it would be something that would be lovely to do down in an experience for the younger children.
Yeah, I mean, I think, every school context is different in a sense, and if you are going to bring a specialist in and you're going to kind of use that resource and invest that, that money, in a sense, you want to know that you're going to get the best value out of it. So I would say probably it's the staff that you need to look at first, in terms of who will benefit most from, and also then be able to share perhaps. So where are you going to get your best value from in terms of using that resource? So yes, I think we often think about, well, if year 3 and 4 have got swimming as another thing, then we ought to give dance to Key Stage 1. But will the Key Stage 1 staff engage fully with it? And if yes, then go for it.
I think they would, yeah.
I think it is about the staff's willingness to kind of take that next step and work in partnership with a specialist coming into school, because effectively that's what it is. That's what I would like to see in my school, is a partnership between an external provider, practitioner, and my teachers, not that person coming in and doing it and going away again. So it's about the legacy that professional comes in and leaves behind.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you for that. Thank you so much.
Okay. How many of you have done dance outside?
We have. I did at the beach.
Great. Because at this time of year, it's a fabulous opportunity, isn't it, to take dance outside? As you say, Carly, minimal resources. You just need something portable that you can play some music on potentially, and that's it. But Interesting points you're making about lack of opportunities for performance and sharing, but you know, in the same, I would much prefer to be in a room with you all face to face, because I think the interaction's different, but online it can still work. Claire's suggesting that folk dance works brilliantly outside. So that's an interesting one as well, because we're actually talking about a particular genre, and folk dancing outside, yeah, that would work brilliantly, wouldn't it? Great. Any other comments from anybody, or are you happy to move on? Okay, I'll go back to screen sharing. Okay, so I'm coming back to Darren, because I think his advocacy is brilliant, and there are some wonderful quotes that you can use from him. But what we're going to go into now is this notion that dance is unique, that there is a uniqueness about what dance offers. It is that blend of physical activity with an opportunity to be creative. And I think also one of the things that I think is really interesting about dance is that anyone can engage in dance, and there isn't a particular skill set that you need to move, in a sense. So I like the idea that it has unique qualities to it as a subject. Okay, so dance is important. So we all know that in terms of physical development for children, dance is about movement, but it offers a greater range of motion, coordination, strength and endurance than most other physical activities, because it uses the whole body. We're not talking about, you know, a specific set of muscles that allow you to perform a particular action. It's a great form of exercise for total body fitness. And young people are naturally active, and I think dance actually encapsulates that kind of natural activity, natural movement that young people have. It's also about how it impacts on people's emotions. The idea that children enjoy themselves when they're dancing, that actually kind of emotions and movement kind of become kind of working together. They've got a physical outlet, but actually because dance often involves other people, they're gaining kind of awareness and an appreciation of others around them. So physical development, I think, is probably the one that we all think of first, and it sits in PE. So that's all about physical activity, isn't it? But there's a lot more to dance than that. If we think about what happens during a group activity, the social awareness that young people actually encounter, how you have to communicate ideas to other people, how you have to learn to work within a group dynamic. How does that evolve during the creation of a dance piece? And sometimes I think we underestimate that challenging process of cooperation for young people, and particularly very young children, that actually learning to cooperate with others, to share, to take, to give. And as a process, I think of children can have a growing social awareness through the process of dance. And then because it's all happening, actually there's a lot going on in the brain as well. And I think again, we underestimate the unique kind of opportunities that dance gives young children in terms of their cognitive development. What are they having to think about in terms of process? It's a physical process, it's an emotional process, it's a social process. So how many different parts of the brain are all working together to create movement in a creative sense? When we did our session on music, the complexity of what happens in the brain when children are listening to or playing a piece of music, there's been a lot of science done on that, and there's lots of scholarly articles written about what happens in the brain. But I would suggest that in dance, similar things are going on because of the different processes that are involved when you actually dance physically. Another little overview that actually, if we put all of those little bits together, dance supports the development of creative thinking. It's that process-driven opportunity. So the idea that we offer children opportunities within the arts, engaging in them helps them solve problems, helps them think outside the box, helps them realize that there's no one right answer, that the way they do things has as much value as the way somebody else does something. So all of that actually really builds into that kind of creative thinking. And I think it's really useful to share some of this with staff, because we too often just think about dance as part of PE, and dance is much, much more than that in terms of child development and physical development, emotional development, social awareness, all of that sort of thing. So it has unique qualities and huge value. I wanted to touch on well-being, because I think well-being is a fairly important issue in schools today. We've been very concerned about children's well-being as they've come back to school after COVID. I think we're still concerned about young people's mental health. I think in secondary schools, there's a great deal of concern about young people's mental health and the pressure that they find themselves under. What impact does dance have on well-being? And this is a study that was done actually a few years ago, but I think still has a great deal of credibility and value. And I've picked out some of the kind of key themes just to share the contribution that dance as an activity can contribute to well-being. So improving mental health. There's a feel-good factor about dancing, isn't there? You know, that sense when you're at a party or wherever and you're just waiting for a few people to get up to dance because you want to, and that kind of sense of kind of happiness and well-being that you have. So that feel-good factor is really important. And I think that impact on self-esteem and body attitude is really significant. I think body image creates a great deal of anxiety in young people, and if through dance you can reduce those stress levels and reduce those anxiety levels, then that's a hugely positive thing. It can improve attitudes to health and well-being. It can improve health problems, you know, and long term, if we're talking about the physical health and mental well-being of young people, I think dance can be a hugely contributory positive factor to that. So we were going to have a little chat now just about, I just want you to reflect just for a couple of minutes on what your dance curriculum looks like now and what you think are the strengths, because I'd really like you to start from a kind of a position of, you know, actually we're doing well, we're doing this well, we're doing this well. But given what we've just kind of discussed, or what I've been talking about in terms of that holistic view of dance, are there any areas that you think you need to develop, or are there any areas where you need perhaps to raise more awareness amongst your staff? So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to have a think, and I'm going to stop screen sharing again. Did any of that resonate with you in terms of that kind of uniqueness, the special features of dance, that holistic kind of offer that it brings? And I suppose, again, my question is, do we get too hung up on the kind of the physical movement side of things, and we actually don't think enough about the cognitive, social, emotional kind of process? Any comments? Very welcome, or comments in chat if you've got any.
I would definitely say that the kind of the wellbeing side really resonates with me and with our school. At the moment, we're also working towards our wellbeing award. So if I do become the PE lead in September, I think there'll be a lot of nice ways that we can implement that dance into kind of our wellbeing approach as a whole school. Because I think totally that, you know, it really helps children. You can see, you know, whenever I use dance or movement incorporate into a different activity within the lessons, such as like times tables, you get that real buzz. Or we were doing Spags the other day, and we're looking at paragraphs, and whichever answer they thought it linked to, we're like doing like a little kind of movement position, and it just, rather than them just sitting in their seats, you know, doing things like that, it just kind of got that enthusiastic spark with the children. And it kind of, and the next day a child went, oh, you know, I need to start a new paragraph because of this. And so that kind of knowledge really stuck in their brain.
Yeah. Nicholas identified as strengths in her school staff who are willing to explore links with other areas of the curriculum, which is a real good strength, because I think that takes dance out of its PE box and kind of gives it a much broader kind of remit. Willing to explore links with other curriculum, and staff very willing to join in. That's great. You know, if you've got a staff that are really, really willing to kind of take things on, that's fantastic. And Claire suggested that dance embodies the whole child learning. It's very immersive. And I think it is that full body experience, isn't it? That is unique to dance, I think. Very much so. So Nicola's put links to texts and art. Nicola, are you able to unmute and tell us a little bit about that? Oh, she's in the classroom, or she's got children in a test, so that's fine. Okay, so interesting. Cross-curricular connections. Does that resonate with those of you from in classrooms? Would you start? It's a question of where's your starting point, isn't it? So is your starting point, for example, a text, and then do you build a dance around it? Or do you start with creating some kind of dance performance and then look at opportunities when the children have learned or have developed skills to a particular kind of level, then you actually look at applying those skills?
Oh yeah, I think in our especially in Key Stage 1, I think our teachers tend to link the their dance sessions, their dance learning to topic work. So if they were learning about see and show, they would be like moving, like in the water. How would they move? Like as animals, how would an animal move in the water? And so they link it very much to or they try to as much as they can. And I think it's happened throughout. If there were like topics about the robots and things, like kind of doing things up in Key Stage 2, like, as if they were acting like a Roman kind of thing, and that. But I'm new in Key Stage 2, so I haven't seen that. And obviously with COVID this year, I haven't been able to kind of go and have a look at what that looks like in terms of the PE coordinator. But from what I can gather through conversation, that they try and make links to a topic so that the movement it takes, they're doing it as part of taking on a role of something which is less intimidating or worrying for the children to participate that way, because it's in a context and they know why they're doing it, because they're on board with the topic.
Yeah. Alison's commented on that their after school clubs that they run are open to every child from reception through the whole primary school. So they work with kind of different year groups and that sort of thing, which is a great opportunity, isn't it? And she's also put, we use talk for writing to movement. So again, it's kind of using movement and linking it to curriculum areas. Where do you think, because you talked before about it being a confidence issue for a lot of staff, where does that confidence, where's that lack of confidence? Is it in how you link dance to other things, or is it in what is dance and how do you develop dance? So even if you're doing it, if you've got the creativity to think about a cross-curricular link and you want to include dance in your kind of, your humanities or your topic work, is the confidence then, what dance am I going to do? What does it look like? Or is it about how do I take it from here and how do I develop it? Where's that lack of confidence, do you think?
I think personally it's in the way that they feel about dance themselves and how confident they feel about dancing and about their ability to move. So I think, or if it's something that they enjoy or don't enjoy, I suppose that's in terms of modelling and being able to know from where you take it and having that confidence and knowledge themselves to be able to then deliver a lesson or a sequence of lessons. If for one lesson, here's where you stop. Now, where do you take that the next week? Where do you take that? And I suppose it's the understanding of the progression of the movements in dance and where they would, I suppose, your starting point of and where they would want them to be. And because I think dance is quite is open to interpretation. So I suppose in terms of kind of looking at and assessing, so I think it's just through conversation with staff, I think it's something that I think it's quite, there's many reasons that maybe there's one or two reasons for one, or more than that for other, or it could just be an element of, but through conversations, that's kind of the feedback that I feel like I'm getting.
And do you think that, you know, if you are PE lead, or you are leading dance in the school, that knowledge of where teachers are at is really quite important, because you need to start from where they are in terms of their own development, don't you?
I think I carried out an audit over our whole PE last week, and as I say, from looking at it, and I'm up to here with school reports, so I haven't acted on it really at the moment, but from looking at it, there was definitely kind of a common thread about confidence in dance and teaching dance. So maybe looking into getting external specialist externally is something that, and I do feel lucky because it's not the staff here, it's not about them not wanting to, or they're willing to engage in training. They want to feel more confident, so they are very much on board. Which again, that's a positive. I feel lucky in that respect.
So I'm just picking up on a thread that Claire's been kind of putting as we've been talking in chat. A confusion between dance education and dance training. You don't have to be a trained dancer to be able to dance or to encourage young children to dance. So I think sometimes we, with certain subjects in school, get hung up on it needs a specialist. Actually, it doesn't, but it's just grounding that confidence for teachers, I think. And also Claire points out that dance is non-linear. So, you know, what is the starting point? You know, if it's a simple movement, it's how do you develop that simple movement and make it bigger, smaller, different, you know. So it can be a very simple approach that you take. So in terms of that confidence issue, for teachers to see that it's not overcomplicated, I think is a really good starting point for a conversation. Interesting point from Alison about the impact on children with special educational needs who might struggle in some aspects of school, but through something like dance, they can really succeed and gain confidence, because that becomes less obvious in dance in terms of their kind of special need or whatever. So interesting food for thought. But I also think as well that, you know, that notion of being aware of where your staff are and what their needs are in this particular area is kind of a key one as well. But some really good strengths coming out there in terms of how you all kind of approach dance. And for those of you who feel that, you know, you've got your staff on board and they're willing to give it a go and try stuff, then do more stuff, you know, get them engaged more. Okay.
Can I just add one more thing, Jean? It was just going back to that whole school stimulus for creative subjects and stuff, and we've got a really brilliant video case study online on the Creative Classrooms page on our website from Cragside Primary School. So they did a whole school approach to the Tempest, looking at movement, dance, music, PE, and it went through the whole curriculum, and we filmed it all in it, and the teachers talking about it. So it's a really good it's a good watch. It's about 10 minutes, and it's on our Creative Classrooms website.
It's a lovely case study, actually, because that kind of whole school cross-curricular approach, and there's so much in there. So yeah, highly recommend it. I'll talk about Creative Classrooms and the website shortly. Are you happy to move on? Anybody, any other comments? Okay, so I'm going to go back to screen sharing. Give me a minute. So just to summarize, I think in terms of challenging assumptions, everybody can love dance. Everybody can dance. It's just how we kind of approach it. And I'm linking this back For those of you who did Rob's sessions, there was something that Rob said which really stuck with me, that actually if we talk about dance as movement, does that make it feel more accessible instead of talking about dance? And going back to Claire's point, you know, we kind of maybe move away from the idea of you need to be trained or you need to be a specialist. So let's just think about movement. You know, movement is a natural process. Our lives are filled with movement. Our bodies thrive on movement. In fact, our bodies are much more healthy if we move, and we move in different ways, and we move a lot. And then movement can also impact on thoughts and feelings. And, you know, what is it that comes to mind when you think about movement as opposed to what comes to mind when you think about dance? And one of the things that Rob said that really stuck with me was that actually dance is movement, but with style. And I really like that, because I think it is movement, but it's stylistic, it's with style, and that's what gives it a different kind of uniqueness. So I'm actually going to keep that in my head for kind of future reference. His story is an interesting one, isn't it? For those that were with us last time, you know, discovered dance at 15, might have gone down a different road, but dance created an opening for him that he loved, and you know, he's now a professional dancer and a very successful one at that. But yeah, so I just thought, following on from what we've said, we might, what I'd really like to find out from you, and I think Charlotte would as well, is kind of what models and approaches are you currently using? We've talked about, you know, having a very engaged staff. We've talked about having a creative staff that are up for kind of linking, cross-curricular links. But if we think about models of delivery, you know, that's the class teacher role in dance provision. And obviously many of you have got kind of strengths in that. What do any of you use schemes of work that kind of structure dance throughout the school? What are they? How good are they? Do you like them? Have you used your PE and sports premium funding for any dance focused activity? Do any of you, I mean, somebody's just talked about, you know, doing a piece of work with Dance City. So how many of you have actually had an external dancer specialist or worked in partnership with a dance organisation? What about the online world, the virtual world that we've all started to inhabit? Have any of you kind of used online dance sessions? We touched on, Alison talked about her after school clubs. Where does dance sit within all of that, in that extracurricular offer? Concerts, assemblies, performance, perhaps not quite so much now, but when we're back to doing all of that, where would dance sit with that? And then what CPD have any of you been involved in, or your staff? So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to have a look at that. And then again, we'll just come together and just share a few ideas. Okay, so we've talked a lot about class teacher role, haven't we? In fact, we've focused on that fair bit. What about schemes of work? Anybody use a scheme of work in school?
So Nicola's put in the chat that the one she uses PE Hub. So used funding for cheerleading, coaching, dance element within that, and virtual dance sessions. They've been doing Jerusalem dance challenges, and they're keen to get some funding to get Robin.
Okay.
Alison says they don't use scheme of work in their school for dance. What
about partnerships? Anybody use a kind of external professional to come in? And
I think our year fours, they take part in a skip dance. So they're doing skipping but dancing. They have to perform it together, but obviously that hasn't been on this year. So I think we're part of the North Tyneside Skipping Festivals. So they all so we do have some external support in terms of they come in and they introduce the activity and start us off. But then I think the teacher is kind of left to put that skip dance together. And I think as well, I know that our children have performed and practiced and performed dances at Whitley Bay Playhouse as well. So I don't know, but again, it's my first year in Key Stage 2. So I don't know whether that's a kind of community where other schools all go and they all perform. So I don't know that that's something, but I know that we are involved in that as well. But we use Val Sabin, or we have Val Sabin scheme of work in school, which is good in a way that in terms of progression, you know, and if teachers aren't confident, it sets it out for them. However, it's not really kind of hugely embraced by staff. I think it's quite dry. I think you've got to stick with the songs that are in there and with the CD in there. So it is very prescriptive, but I suppose in terms of for those members of staff that do not have confidence, it means that they've got something to follow, and kind of even for their own confidence, like, right, this must be right, I'm doing this, so they can get their head around something before they go ahead and teach. But it's a mixed feeling around that.
I suppose, you know, in kind of doing this, I'm just trying to kind of flag up that mixed economy that you can have in terms of provision. So, you know, what is it that the class teacher delivers? How is that structured and supported? You know, a lot of schools use schemes of work, but there are many who don't. How do you enrich and enhance through the use of your extra funding? How do you enrich and enhance through perhaps partnership working, bringing in specialists? And that notion of sharing as well. You know, if you're in a trust and you've got a group of schools that work very cooperatively together, actually sharing expertise is really important. We did touch on enrichment, and obviously dance is often an extracurricular activity for lots of reasons, and sometimes that can be delivered by somebody external to the school as well. What about CPD? Do you feel that there's enough? There isn't the right sort? Have you sought some? Can't find any? Just interesting kind of feedback on that, really.
Just in the chat, Nicholas saying very limited CPD. That's why Rob's session was so helpful, because you can't see the chat, can you? Claire, I write resources for Key Stage 1 and 2. If anyone would like a sample, please feel free to email me. So we'll put your email out afterwards and let you know any themes that you'd like.
That's great, Claire. That's
brilliant.
Excellent.
And just going back to the previous conversation, Amy said, in my previous school, we connected dance to Makaton, and the children learned Makaton through dance to support their understanding of speech. We're currently working with Dance City, and my school is part of a trust, therefore schools come together to perform and share their learning pre-COVID, and there was a lot of performances happening between schools then.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so just to move on, I'm looking here at just flagging up a couple of points for resource. I'm flagging up One Dance UK because they're almost a one-stop shop for dance, and they support professional dancers working in education as well as schools. So I think if you were to look them up, they've got their website is full of really useful and current thinking, news articles. There's a resource section for schools. All of that is really, really helpful. The other one that I flagged up, which again is a bit of a one-stop shop, is actually Culture Bridge North East's Creative Classrooms. Again, this is a fantastic resource, and I've highlighted Compendium. This is a section on creative classrooms, which actually was created as a response to schools going into lockdown and finding themselves having to deliver an online offer. So there's a lot of resources in there that you might find useful, and they're all organised in different kind of areas as well. So again, a really good kind of one-stop shop. Creative Classrooms, we've been running Creative Classrooms now for a couple of years, and we were really getting into the swing of providing CPD opportunities face-to-face in a lovely cultural venue, and then COVID struck. So we too have had to take ourselves online. So this is why the kind of the dance offer, the music offer, all kind of came out of us having to change our practice as well. I'd really like to flag this up for you. as a useful resource. If you feel you need to advocate the case for dance, this is a very accessible document. It's actually one of a series that was written for the National Governors Association in partnership with One Dance UK and Arts Council. So it's Arts Council and the Governance Association working together to provide these guides for governors around dance, art and design, music and drama. They've just recently been refreshed and brought up to date, and they've brought in a specialist kind of organisation to work with them to do that. And in dance, it's One Dance UK. So I highly recommend this document. It's very, very accessible. So if you are providing an advocacy case to your senior leaders or to your governors, I'd highly recommend that. Claire's highlighted as a resource the Royal Opera House, CreatED Dance on their website, and Oak Academy have some dance on theirs. And I think some of those are also flagged up on their resource list from One Dance UK as well. So thanks for that, Claire. Another Creative Classrooms suggestion, there's the website, but you will get all of that as after this session, because obviously we'll kind of give you the PowerPoint as well. So I've kind of come to the end of what I wanted to talk to you about, and what I was going to give you the opportunity to kind of discuss and share. I'm sorry that actually it's been quite a small group, but I hope that you've found the opportunities to kind of share your ideas really useful. I'm just wondering if, before you go, you just might leave as a final thought in chat. It could be something that you found useful, and that's really good feedback for us in terms of, you know, whether this session actually kind of did what we thought we wanted it to achieve. Perhaps there's something that you've taken from this morning that you might want to share with a colleague, or is there something that we've kind of flagged up that you'd just like to find out a little bit more about? So if I leave you with that, if you can give us a little note in chat, that would be really, really good. Just like to say thank you. Thank you for participating, thank you for sharing, and thank you for contributing your thinking. It's been a good session, thank you, and thank you for all of your contributions.
Thank you, and a big thank you to Jeanne on behalf of Culture Bridge, and thank you to everybody for coming as well. Our next CreatED series will be launched in September, and it's going to be about art and design, so look out for that, and there's lots of other opportunities.